Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. First of all, I'd really like to thank Russell and our whole Greenpeace whānau for the opportunity of coming here and sharing some of the slides, and it's a great opportunity to sort of put all this stuff together after 40 years. But there's so much to talk about. I thought, well, what am I going to do for this? So what I've mostly done is condensed a few of images and some impressions we had actually on the Rainbow Warrior in the Marshall Islands. This image here, some of you might have seen it because we did a pretty big project with students 10 years ago at AUT, and all their work, their mahi and so on, is basically collected there. A whole range of little short news stories, 2.5 minutes or so, and a whole bunch of studio interviews with people like Bunny, and lots of people had taken at that time, and it's a really good resource for schools. But anyway, that was the image that's actually sort of at the anchor page on this website. It was called Eyes of Fire 30 Years On. The thing is, for this book, it's actually had quite a history of different editions at different times. We go on to the next one. And so the first question I have is, well, why was I actually on board? And there's a story to that. This the image of the Rainbow Warrior under sail. Both Fernando and I joined the Rainbow Warrior in Hawaii after the total refit of Rainbow Warrior as a sailing vessel. But why was I actually on board? If we just go on to the next slide, thanks. And these are probably the key people why I happened to be on board. First of all, Elaine Shaw, who was coordinator of Greenpeace way back then, and she was someone who really persuaded me. I was a freelance journalist at the time, and doing a lot of work for some papers like the New Zealand Times, that's now the Sunday Star Times, and the Australian, when it wasn't as extreme right-wing as it is today, Radio Australia and Radio New Zealand, and quite a lot of others. And I was specialising in environmental stories and also decolonisation issues, and so I did a lot of work on the Kanak struggle and through the 80s and so on. So Elaine was really keen to have a journo on board the Rainbow Warrior for the Pacific Voyage. She had been trying to get this voyage happening for about 5 years, I think it was, that she was always pressing on Greenpeace International. We've got to send the Rainbow Warrior down to Aotearoa and to really take action over the nuclear tests. And when finally Greenpeace decided to do this voyage, they had a few journalists lined up that went on board, all from the Northern Hemisphere. And Elaine said, so really we've got to have someone from here. We need the story out here and the media in Aotearoa and so on. So she was a key person that really got me fired up to doing this. But it was a difficult decision. As a freelancer, I had to keep the bills covered and so on. And they wanted me to go for quite a long time. And I thought, I don't know really I can go. I ended up, I was on board for 10 and a half weeks. But thanks to Steve Sawyer, they came to an arrangement and they said, okay, you won't be officially in the crew, but you will be doing all the mahi for the crew. So I was on a watch and so on, and then to do the journalism on side as well. So it didn't actually cost me, like I think most media organisations at the time they had to pay to be on the voyages like this and so on. So that made it possible for me to go. And then Senator Jeff Nanjane, from the Marshall Islands. He was the key person in negotiating with Steve about the voyage, and first approached Greenpeace that if we could actually help us for the people of Rongelap, our people. He was the senator from Rongelap, to get away from the nuclear legacy that had been left with the US, particularly the Castle Bravo test that actually sort of dusted the Rongelap people. You know all the background of that. But it's actually these three people really were critical for me actually joining the Rainbow Warrior. And sadly, they've all left us. And sadly, cancer in all three cases. And Jetton's actually generally thought that his cancer was actually definitely related to the nuclear testing in the Marshall Islands. If I can just go on the next slide now. So, okay, just some map. A lot of these images you might have seen if you've got my book. Some of them are actually in their book. Others are not. Anyway, this was basically we joined. Fernando and I joined up here in Hawaii, but the crew had actually come all the way from Jacksonville and so on for the voyage right up to here. And this shows we went to the Marshall Islands. Then we went down to Kiribati after the evacuation of the people of Rongelap, and then to Vanuatu. And of course, Vanuatu at that time was a key country, had just become independent. Walter Lini, Father Walter Lini was the Prime Minister, first Prime Minister of Vanuatu, an incredible champion for nuclear-free Pacific. And in fact, he wrote a foreword for the first edition I did of that book. And then from Vanuatu, of course, back here. Now, the interesting thing is that there are about 6 journalists on board, other than me. A couple of the others had a connection with Greenpeace. John Perillis, he was doing the video stuff. A couple of others from Japan. One Hiromitsu, he interviewed everybody on Rongelap. He'd been there for quite some time before we arrived, and he wrote a book called Goodbye Rongelap. He featured all the people who were actually on board, but unfortunately it was in Japanese, so it wasn't widely known about in our part of the world. Okay, so just go on a little bit. Next slide. Oh, okay. So this is everybody who's on board. Took this photo from the bridge, and it's Lloyd Anderson. It's just starting from here. Lloyd Anderson, I've mentioned him first because for both Fernando and I is really important. He played a key role as the radio operator. In those days, you know, the whole technologies and so on were pretty basic. Fernando set up a dark room in the library in the Rainbow. I'll show you a map a little bit later on where everything was. But so he had to do all this processing of the photographs and then send the pictures by wire machine from the bridge, from the Lloyd's radio operating room and so on. And I was sending stuff by telex and so on. For people who remember telex, really quite a thing. But also doing radio, because I did a lot of stuff for Radio New Zealand and Radio Australia, and so they just were straight voice reports. I found that's the easiest ones to do. But anyway, so that's Lloyd, and then there's Henkhausen, there's Bunny, and then Peter Wilcox. I meant to say something in the very first frame that we saw. You saw somebody with binoculars, and I was going to ask if anybody can recognise who that was. But anyway, that was Peter in that first image. And then Martini Gotcha. Grace O'Sullivan. Grace has done some fantastic things as a European Member of Parliament. She's not actually in the European Parliament now, but she's been doing some fantastic things on Palestine, and really outspoken, and really made quite an impact in the European Parliament. Benny Hoffman, and he actually did. He sent us, after we did their website in 2015. He said, you know, I've actually kept a diary right through the voyage and so on. So he sent over the diary. It was in German, and he actually kindly translated it all for us as well. So we put that on. It was too late for the book at the time, but we put it on the website, and I've got a bit of that in the latest edition that we're doing of the book. And then Davey Edward, he didn't look. It's actually quite hard to get photographs sometimes, and everybody's doing different things, you know. And then there's Hannah Sorensen, and then Natalie Mestre, and as Andy Bearderman. He was the deckhand, but also he was like a ship's doctor. So neither Fernando and I, we're not in the picture there because we were both standing on by the bridge to get these photographs. If we have a look at the next one. just a question. I wonder if anybody can sort of pick. There's quite a few extras here. Of course, we had a few on board from the Marshall Islands who joined us. I'll just mention about them in a moment. But does anybody recognise me in the picture? At the time, I was 39, and I think I was the oldest on board at that time. So, but yeah, changed a bit. Anyway, so we go on to the next slide. So these you saw them in the previous frame. So these are the 3 Marshall Islanders who came with us. Jetan Injine wasn't on board at that stage. He came and joined us later for the evacuation from Rongelap itself. But just to remind myself their names, and this guy he was a chief, the Voyage. Kotek Lurk was his name, and Jobo Samuel was this guy here, and this old Julian Ricklong. Julian was very helpful for me when basically doing interviews and so on, not knowing any Marshallese at all. I found he was really helpful to do translations and identify people, that I should talk to and so on. Okay, so next one is my favourite photo of Fernando, and that's just when we arrived at Rongelap. To me, that sort of really summed him up, and he's with one of the elders of the island. But for things like media and stuff and so on, I've sometimes used that picture of both of them, and sometimes I've cropped it onto, tight onto Fernando, and I use that the cropped one actually in the book to sort of introduce as a sort of memorial to him. And I didn't mention her name, but it's Bonimej Namwe, and she was then one of the elder women of of Rongelap itself. Next one is a cartoon. I think it's been one of my favourite cartoons, and that was President Mitterrand. President Mitterrand, of course, was the French president who gave the all go to get basically to target the Rainbow Warrior and bomb it. Next one, the next one I've actually got a video here, but has anybody seen this one? That was done. It was based around the exhibitions we did in 1986, just after the Rainbow Warrior. We had 2 exhibitions, one in Auckland, one in Wellington. It's mostly my photographs, but there were also photographs of people like John Miller and Gil Hanley and a few others. So this was the welcome on Rongelap itself, and we beached. We just came in what they call a boom boom, which is a little runabout boats that we used for fishing. Quite a few of those, and that's what we used for loading up the Rainbow Warrior itself. And the next one I think shows Bunny at that welcome, and we all went through a sort of welcome ceremony there. Now the next few photographs are basically about the evacuation itself, because I think we were all caught by surprise. Our story was that everybody decided they're going to leave, they're going to move. The legacy of health from the nuclear testing and so on had just been too devastating, and the whole community, 320 people in the community in the village, decided we're going to leave. Of course, this is really quite a major thing for any Pacific community, because your land is everything. It's your whole tradition is everything based around connection to the land. And so to lose that and go somewhere else, somebody else's land, you don't have the connections and so on. So this was a huge thing to happen. But it had actually been decided long in advance by primarily Senator Jetan Injine. He negotiated for all the people, and they'd come to an arrangement with Greenpeace to come and rescue the people and move them to Rongelap. But when we arrived there, the village is still there, and I think we sort of half expected that people would actually have started making a move. and pulling down their homes and so on. So it was quite a shock to us that, oh, well, do the people really want to move? And so for the next, I think it's next 3 nights, there were community discussions in the sort of meeting house that we had in the village, and there was still a lot of discussion going on. They had decided, but it's just such a huge thing to think about leaving, especially for all the old people. And so I think that basically people were leaving to the last moment to sort of take any action about it. And so then once it started, all the houses were starting to be taken down. And this is a photo of a school. And Time Eason was the teacher here. And the photo was actually partially, the school building had partially been taken down at that point, so progress was actually starting to happen now about taking down the buildings. And then everything had to be ferried out to the Rainbow Warrior. And next photo, that's Senator Gentleman John when he arrived. By that time, the village was sort of partially in the process of being taken down, as you can see. And the only building that remained, in fact, I didn't include a photo in this, unfortunately, but I've got them of the church. It's the stone church on the island of Rongelap. That was the only thing that remained. Next thing, we've got a woman carrying her mats and so on from her house, and all going down to the beach to be taken on to the boom booms out to the Rainbow Warrior. Next photo, that shows so boom booms like this. There's only just a few of them, but everything was ferried out to the Rainbow Warrior and then loaded on board. Now the next image I've got here is a it's, well, just to really just show you the complexities a bit of the actual evacuation and so on. So we actually had 4 trips all told. And the first one was probably the longest one that we actually took to get loaded up. We got better as better as it went on, but it took a whole week to do this. And pretty emotional as well, because, you know, we could feel the emotion from the people themselves, and I think it's stayed with us for the rest of our lives. This experience, quite something to, you know, to help people, helping them in a way, but also knowing the unknown of what they're going to. I didn't explain to you about the other island because I talked about the land, the issues about land. So they were offered this other island called Majato, which was on another atoll altogether, Kwajalein. Kwajalein's notorious for the Star Wars, American Star Wars, trying to still have the military base there and so on. But so this is Kwajalein here. And the military bases down at this end, this is all the sort of a closed area for the military, and there's a notorious island right down here called Ebai. It was, for many years, it's known as the most densely populated island in the world, actually. But Majato is way over here. And there's another island close by called Ubadon, and nobody was living on Majato. But Majato belonged to the people of Ubadon. And so they offered, they were related, you know, to the people of Rongelap, and they offered, well, you can have Majato and you can resettle there and so on. So, but when we arrived there, like Rongelap was absolutely sort of like the epitome of the sort of beautiful Pacific paradise island. You know, everything about it was really wonderful. And Majato is also quite beautiful, but there were a few disadvantages. For example, there was a shortage of water, and the fishing reef was so shallow, went out for quite a long way. It's about 3 kilometres something, went basically at low tide. So, whereas in Rongelap you go straight out into the lagoon and go fishing straight away, sort of thing. Anyway, to come back to these voyages, the 4 voyages, the first voyage we took ages to load up. I think it's about 24 hours or so, and then we had about 20 tonnes of corrugated iron and stuff all sort of brought onto the deck and stashed away. And 75 people were on that first voyage, mostly elderly and mothers on that first trip. And then the second one was, we had even more people, 114 people, and I consulted my book, it said about 100 tonnes, and I thought, God, was it really 100 after 20? Really? Anyway, so that's the figure I had. So things start to get a little bit blurry after 40 years, but it was pretty amazing to getting all the stuff on board anyway. And then the third voyage, I don't have any tonnage about what we carried then, but we had 87 people on board the third one, and then last one was mostly younger people, about 44 of those people on that voyage. And probably the most fun voyage was the last one, because we have a lot of chats, with people actually on board and so on. If we look at the next picture, gives you an idea of stuff that was all, from the houses being carried out on the bombers, and then they all had to be loaded at sea. No jetty or anything like that on Rongelap. No airstrip or anything like that then as well, although an airstrip was put in some years later. So all this had to be loaded up onto the Rainbow Warrior. Next one is another shot of people getting on board and so on. Just a few more shots of this as well. Steve Sawyer here, Andy Bierneman, and the skipper Pete Wilcox. But to give you an idea of just stacks and stacks of the corrugated iron, and this all had to be sort of organised and sorted out on the beach to then bring over. It's pretty amazing, really. Okay, so there's another one there of another boom boom, people coming out, and that's Steve Sawyer up there at the top. On board, luckily we didn't have any bad weather when these trips happened. We were pretty lucky, really, right through that whole week, and it was pretty crowded. I think this is from the second voyage that we had. Another one, so gives you an idea of. This is pretty amazing. Like, the whole experience was pretty amazing, because Greenpeace, being direct action movement and so on, it's quite a shift to go from direct action to something humanitarian. Right, there's one of the older ladies. I think she was on the first trip. I can't recall her name. And then so we get to Majato, and everything's just offloaded onto the beach. We had to, because it was such a shallow thing, we had to sort of put all the building materials and things into the sea, and then it was shallow enough we could actually wade and pull the things, like float them back onto the beach itself. And that was pretty emotional as well, because we're moving all the people there. They've taken all their homes down, and then they're just being dumped on the beach, if you like. It's not like that dumped, but the thing is that they had no homes, they had no shelter, had nothing at all. So tarpaulins were put up very quickly to have some tents, and I think the next one shows something from that. And of course, so once we'd done all these voyages, I'll just have another look at the next shot. Thanks. That's one of the Recklon family, Jebin Recklon, and that's one of the shelters. So we had direct action to carry on after this, and so we were leaving the people to get on with their lives and rebuild homes and so on. It's really quite. So next few shots, I'm just showing you about some of the things we did. So we went from Majato across the atoll to the other end of Kwajalein, trying to make a mark on the Star Wars tests and things that are going on there. And so this was just sailing past some of the monitoring domes, radar domes and so on that were in the Kwajalein area. And we got to Ebi. which I mentioned before, the very densely populated atoll. It's mainly a dormitory for labour on the military base and at Kodgeline. And this was the direct action we had there. We sort of put the banners up on Stop Star Wars, and we had two Zodiacs around for this. One went beach to shore, and then I was in the other one. We were taking photographs and video and so on. Okay, so right, moving on. I've skipped Kiribati, but it's really interesting going to Kiribati as well. I've just gone on to Vanuatu for this one because of Vanuatu's real strong support for Greenpeace and Nuclear Free Pacific and so on. It was pretty amazing to sort of see the welcome. Port Vila, the capital, it's only about it's only about 180,000 people. It's a bit more now, but at that time, it's about 180,000 people in the whole country. So Port Vila wasn't a big town by any means, but it's sort of like the whole city was welcoming us, you know. Walter Lini, as I say, is a champion for Nuclear Free Pacific, and they won at the time that New Zealand was, barring US warships, so on. Vanuatu did the same. It didn't get anywhere near the publicity that New Zealand got, but they actually, it was serious. They actually stopped, I think it was two warships actually from visiting Vanuatu. But this was one little video stories that done as part of the Mahi by AUT students in 2015. And this particular one is about the book Eyes of Fire. And also the book industry, because there were lots and lots of books published about the Rainbow Warrior bombing. As you probably realise, a lot of them are pretty inaccurate in lots of ways. And the thing that really upset me was that the two French spies, the ones that were unmasked as like the pseudo honeymooning couple, Captain Alain Maffat and Dominique Pure, they went back to France, and they were decorated with the Légion d'honneur, which is the highest award for anybody in France, and also both published books and made money. I mean, most books, political books, you don't make books in New Zealand. The only books you make money is like cookery type books and so on. So personally, I found it really, really disturbing that that the spies actually got away with their reduced sentences and so on. But I think they come up here. So we're not going to see that. It's only a short thing. But I do suggest, if you have time sometime, just go to that website and see the stories that the students have actually done. So this is Fernando in the makeshift dark room that he set up. Much easier these days with digital. You don't have to worry about. I never did any processing like this. I just bundle all my slides and things and then process them back here, because I didn't have to worry about sending them to media organisations. I was basically just doing stories. But it's critically important for Greenpeace to have pictures immediate. And it's thanks to Fernando that we actually got such a tremendous coverage around the world for people being relocated. It's a really indictment of the US testing program. Okay, so next one. Oh, just coming back. This is actually coming back to. We're now on the leg from Vanuatu back to Aotearoa, and. This is how important Vanuatu considered our mission. They actually put a diplomat on board. This is Charles Rower, and he was, I can't remember, he was the second secretary or something like that, and one of the political officers. So he was actually an ambassador being sent. And I often wondered, when the French bombed the Rainbow Warrior, if it's tragic that Fernando died, but personally, and I've written about this, that I think we could have easily had 4 or 5 deaths that night. It's just a miracle that didn't happen. He was ashore at the time, but I was thinking, what if someone like him? There would have been, sort of international incident in a tiny country as well. Sadly, he's no longer with us. he passed away for a few years. But this is the night before the bombing. I wasn't actually on board the night of the bombing, because I was already back home, and so I only came down early next morning when I heard about the bombing. But this was the night before, and there were a few MPs and other various people visiting, and I believe this was the last photo, Fernando, before the Rainbow Warrior was bombed, and this was Charles Rowe. But this photo, I mean, like that's John Miller's photo, and I noticed I'm really pleased to see that that's actually on the display for the track going up, John's photo, and it's really iconic. But I wanted to say something about him because he's done tremendous work for environmental work and activist work generally, John Miller, and can I just back again, please, for a moment? So he did the original Rainbow Warrior Eyes of Fire book that we did. He did this wonderful diptych, which we used as a wraparound for the book. Later on, because it was so fresh in people's minds, we focused around the bombing. But what I've tried to do in more recent editions is really focus about the Rongelap. Oh, sorry. Focus on the actual evacuation and the humanitarian and the people's story. But anyway, that was John's diptych, and there's quite a few of his photographs in the new edition of the book as well. So where are we up to? Right on that Marsden North. Yeah. Now that's Gil Henley's picture. It was also another iconic image. And just a few shots of the Rainbow Warrior afterwards, after the bombing. As I was already off, I'd actually forgotten to collect my passport. And I didn't even realise I didn't have my passport, and I was actually sure. But when the Rainbow Warrior was taken across to Devonport Naval Base, and it was actually put up in the dry dock area there and so on, we actually had a chance. We were able to go over and visit the ship and see all the damage from the bombings, and they handed me my passport. They'd actually even treated it, so they got rid of all the salt water and stuff. So that's my one souvenir, if you like, of the bomb ship. And that was in the Heads, which is just immediately above. Fernando and I, we had cabins just down on either side. I think I've got the next picture might be a bit of a, yeah. So we had cabins right down here. This is sort of an attempt at sort of scheming of the very narrow staircase down there. And when the first bomb went off, it was blew up a hole the size of a bus. It's huge in the engine room. And then the second bomb crippled the propeller that we saw there up in the memorial today. And there was cabins above here. So if anybody had been, like Hank and Bunny, for example, had a cabin immediately after, and there was lots of metal and stuff that just shot up through the floor of from the engine room and so on. Anyway, that was the scene because Greenpeace in those days, it really was tiny. I think the Greenpeace office had 2 rooms in Nagle House, just near the district court building and so on. And at that stage I was freelancing, but I was also, it was one of my freelancing roles, I was the associate editor on A New Outlook. It doesn't exist now, but it was actually quite a good progressive magazine back then. And we had an office just not far from this one in the same building. But you can see everybody there. I'll just mention Hans Gade, because he wasn't in the crew, but he came out after the bombing and so on. And yeah, okay. Just another good cartoon. I think I like that one. That's the Malcolm Walker. And for me, it had a real, really resonated for me because as a journalist, I was writing a lot about the Kanak struggle for independence at the time and spending quite a lot of time there. So I was really impressed with Malcolm Walker to actually sort of point this out, that because I don't think I had any illusions. It was the French immediately, the bombing happened. the horrible things they were doing as the colonial policies in the time in New Caledonia, they're assassinating leaders and so on. They had a heavy military, sort of clamp down in New Caledonia and so on. So it just fitted in with the pattern, just absolute disregard for the Pacific. New Zealand was just another country that can actually just get away with this horrible effort and so on. And I think, just Rogues Gallery, just a few of them. But I think just to mention, I mean, know the ones anyway, but I might mention just the ones to the thing is, could easily have been 6 arrests. The New Zealand police almost got the crew members on the Uvair, the ones that carried the bombs here and brought and it's only Australians that actually sort of torpedoed New Zealand police's chance of doing that, because they had to get forensics. They, in those days, very difficult transport. They needed basically about 48 hours for all the forensics to be come back, the reports and that sort of thing. So they actually had evidence for them to be held. And the Australians said, no, we're giving you a day. I think it was a day that they were given to detain them, and then they had to be released. There's actually a journalist, investigative journalist in Australia at the moment, SBS. He's actually working on a doco, trying to find out why Australia did this. My speculation around it is that they were just part of the whole nuclear industrial complex and sort of thing, because both the US and UK were not at all supportive to Aotearoa. And they probably put pressure on Australia. No, don't cooperate at all. Anyway, it'd be interesting to see if this journalist does come up with something. But anyway, just a little bit. Christine Carbon was the one that infiltrated Greenpeace. I have to admit I knew nothing about her whatsoever, because I was on board the Rainbow Warrior, and it's only after arriving back here that we heard how she had succeeded in. Bearing in mind that, as we all know, Greenpeace is a very open organisation, and there's hardly anything secret that she would have actually sort of gotten onto that was actually not public information anyway. But anyway, so she infiltrated Greenpeace, and the thing that surprised me is that the reports from people who actually knew her at the time, and the reflections on that, she seemed to be a pretty weird person to have not been asking a lot of questions about, really. She apparently used to come into the office all dressed in blue, white, red most days and that sort of thing, and also did not seem terribly sympathetic to Greenpeace values. So like there were a whole lot of question marks, and I think people sort of starting asking questions, but of course by then she'd gone. Her critical role was providing maps and so on back to DGS headquarters in Paris. And then her career as a spy was over. Her cover being blown, so that was the end of her DGSE career. So she was switched over to the conventional military, and I think she retired as a colonel. And then some journalists discovered where she was living in a village in the south of France, near Toulouse, and she had, had a pretty nondescript sort of life. She was the mayor of this small town. I think it's about 200 people live there, and so on. And no regrets. The attitude is military. Oh, we were following orders and so on. This guy, Jean-Luc Kister, he supposedly was the one who planted the bombs, and. There's another person I don't think they've actually identified, because the two of them would have been in the Zodiac when they planted. So he might have been the bomber, and he planted the bombs, but there would have been another guy with a boat, running the boat while he's. So I don't think that person's ever been named or known who it is. Anyway, he was tracked down by. It's interesting. The same journalist, Edwy Plenel, is a French journalist. When all the rumours were floating around and the investigations at the time, and all the fingers were starting to be pointed at France, and it was always being continually denied by the French government, it was actually Edwy Plenel, who was the police reporter of Le Monde newspaper, who actually broke the story, that it actually was a French operation, Secret Service, and the orders were given and that sort of thing. Well, Edwy Plenel left, many years later, he left Le Monde and he started his own digital website, and there's a whole team of investigative journalists, and it's called Media Power. And they break lots of stories. And so he was the one that broke. I mean, it was big news in the Sunday Star Times, but it was actually Every Purnell who identified this guy, and they tracked him down to his home, and he sort of apologised to people, but is it sincere? I don't know. Was it just currying favour? Who knows? Who knows really? Anyway, I think I've got a couple more. Oh yeah, well, just a few little acknowledgements, because Martini, all these years he's been running this really good radio program on Waiheke, the Navigator, and so on, and it's always great music program, but a really good activist station as well, and a lot of items that he's actually been broadcasting. So I've lost my notes here, so I can't quite remember what I had in it. Oh yeah, okay, this is interesting. This is a journalist contact that I had, because I've never been back to Rongelap or Majato at all, or to the Marshall Islands for that matter, in 40 years. Unlike Bunny and Hank, who have just been there just recently, and Bunny, of course, was in 1986. She was there for 3 months, really dedicated to the people. But this is actually on Rongelap, not Majato, but this actually, the copy of the book Eyes of Fire is actually looking at the pages. So I just thought I'd throw that in for fun. And this is more recent times. Thanks Greenpeace for the images, Nick. And over in just to point this out here, you see this photograph here on the T-shirts. You might remember that early on in the slideshow there was a picture of my photo of Senator Jetanonjan and Steve Sawyer. And so I feel very honoured that they use this as a T-shirt 40 years on. I'd love to get one. But anyway, that's rather nice. And picture of Bunny and Hank in Rongelap. And maybe you probably can't read this. I'll just read it out. It's just it's a piece that Bunny's reflections. He said, "The welcome and story remembering with so many young and old has been the best part. Laughing, crying, teasing, taking selfies while sitting under the breadfruit tree, with a sea breeze sharing the past and the present. We are treated like family. We were called Grandpa and Boo-Boo, which is Grandma, by the pastor on the island." Oh yeah, just that was back in '86. Yeah. Oh yes, right. I forgot about this. I really love this cartoon. This is the cartoonist for Le Monde, Plantu, and he's actually in the cartoon itself. He's sitting back in the classroom here. That's in there. But basically, it sort of sums it up very well. At this time, only presidents had the right to carry out terrorism, because basically it was state terrorism, and really infuriated me at times that a lot of media would not actually use that term, state terrorism. And so I think that's it. Thanks. Thanks for listening to me.